Kia ora koutou. Kia ora. We will get started, but before we get started, just a few key notices. So first of all, this session is recorded and live streamed. So you can go back and watch it later. There potentially are people watching this online. In terms of health and safety, bathrooms down the hallway here, in an event of an emergency, earthquake, drop, cover, hold, an event of an evacuation, follow myself or Monique, and we will guide you out the main exits, which are to your right here, or your left here, but also out the door that we came, and we assemble next door in front of the bottle store. Thank you for coming to the session. There'll be a mixture of presentation between myself and Monique. And so in terms of myself, I'm Ashley. In my day job, I am the Business Performance Manager. And so within my portfolio, I look after democracy services, health and safety, procurement, risk, official information, and privacy. But why I'm here today is also, on the other hand, I'm also our Deputy Electoral Officer, so I guide our council alongside Elections NZ, our contractor that assists. I guide our council through the election process. We will start with the first section from Monique.
Kia ora koutou everyone. It's lovely to see you all. We weren't quite sure how many people were going to come this evening. We'd like to think this is a really popular topic, hence why we had so many seats out. Someone made a comment about how we put the hard seats out instead of the soft seats, and were we trying to send a signal to future elected members? No, we just thought that there would be more people than soft seats. But ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, haere mai ki te kaunihira o Horowhenua. I'm Monique Davidson, Chief Executive of Horowhenua District Council, and I do feel like I'm amongst familiar faces. Most of you I know because you're either a current elected member or you're engaged in council kaupapa through a whole lot of different mechanisms. So welcome and thank you for coming this evening. Today marked a pretty significant milestone in our election timeframe because we issued the pre-election report. And the pre-election report is a legislative requirement that all chief executives around New Zealand have to issue what I've called a mission briefing to our community, to those who are considering standing or those who want to engage in the hard conversations leading up to the election. The pre-election report is not an audited document, but it is formed on the basis of all the audited documents that we do have, and you'll learn quickly, if you haven't already learnt, that local government is one of the most audited institutions in New Zealand. But it is developed without any influence or contribution from current elected members. So it has to be completely politically neutral and not have any interface to the current council. So what I'm going to do this evening is talk at a really high level about some of the things that you'll find in the pre-election report. And for those of you who are interested in the Horizons Regional Council conversation, this is not Horizons Regional Council's pre-election report, but I'm sure that when they issue their pre-election report, we'll make sure that you get a copy. But it does focus a lot on Horowhenua District Council, but with that it means it focuses a lot on Horowhenua. So it is relevant because it talks about some of our big issues and the big conversations we need to have. I'm then going to hand over to Ashley, and she's going to talk about all of the rules around election timeframes and get into some of the nitty-gritty electoral responsibilities and conversations that I'm sure you're really interested in. We absolutely want to open for Q&A, but what we'll do is I'll go through some stuff, Ashley will go through some stuff, then we'll take Q&A, and then I'll wrap it up at the end. When I met with the team a few months ago to kind of issue my instructions around the pre-election report, I had a vision that it was going to have a bit of a superhero theme, because I really like this idea that we talk about not all superheroes wear capes. And one of my biggest frustrations in local government is that often the work of council goes unnoticed. And in crisis, we see community often acknowledge those that wear uniforms, but often community doesn't actually associate local government in that context. And so the pre-election report, which is titled Ordinary People Delivering Extraordinary Things, is something I really want you to sit and reflect on, because the role of an elected member requires extraordinary people. It is not an easy job, and I'm not even one of them, so I don't really know. But what I do know is that council is extremely complex, and the role of an elected member in managing the task of not just being a director of this district's biggest business, but also being an elected representative where they have to answer to their constituents, who are the ones that have voted in and given the mandate, is a challenging job. But tonight is about providing you information for you to be in a position about whether you want to make a decision and whether the call to serve as an elected member is for you. In the pre-election report, there is and I'm not going to go into much detail about it right now, but there is a range of information that builds the context for you about what do we know about this place, Horowhenua. And I would encourage you on page 5, 6, 7 and 8 in particular to really dig into some of the data that talks about our community and the story behind our community. We know that our rohi stretches 106,391 hectares between the Tararua Range and the sea. It is the southernmost district in the Manawatu-Wanganui region, and you'll note that at times we associate ourselves with the Wellington region, but under statute we are certainly within the Horizons region. We have a diverse geography. We ultimately are a provincial council, and interesting, we're now considered one of the larger provincial councils, and so often when we compared against other councils, we compared against cities, and you'll see that in the upcoming service benchmarking, which the government is kindly releasing for us in a few weeks' time, where as a council we're compared to cities more than provincial councils, and that's because of our population and because of how much we are growing. The 2023 census results confirmed our population was at 36,693, with 9,450 families and 14,250 households. And you can get a feel there for how our demographic shapes up in comparison to New Zealand. And in particular, acknowledging the higher Māori and European that we have living in the Horowhenua. But what I would note is that we are becoming more diverse with immigration, but also the role as a welcoming community settlement. We are seeing a lot more Pacifica and Asian people represented in our community. I want to take a moment just to clarify representation for the 2025 election. And so this is in the context of Horowhenua District Council. So if you're considering standing, you'll be thinking about whether you stand in the Miranui ward, which there is 1 seat, the Waipihu ward, which there are 2 seats, the Levin ward, which there are 5 seats, the Kirikiri ward, which there are 2 seats, or in the Māori ward, which there are 2 seats. We also have a mayor that is elected at large, and then we also have the Te Awaho Foxton Community Board, of which there are 5 positions available. If you are on the Māori roll, voters will vote for the Māori ward and the mayor. They will not be able to vote in the Kirikiri ward and live in ward, and Miranui ward, and my Waipihu ward as well. It's an important clarification. We often hear people think that being on the Māori roll means that they get 2 votes. No, it just means that they vote in the Māori ward in comparison to the geographical wards. I'm not going to go into too much detail because you're all going to take the pre-election report home and read it in front of the fire tonight over a very large cup of tea. But what I would encourage you to do is be informed about the numbers and facts, of which this is only a snapshot about what we know about our people. But this is important to build the context about the opportunity, but also the challenges when we think about the socioeconomic profile of people that live in Horowhenua. Instead, I want to spend most of my time talking about our mission and our mandate. And so what I want to be really clear about is that what I'm sharing with you right now is the mandate that our current elected member table has set. Because as Chief Executive, my job is not to set the direction. That is the job of elected members. My job is to deliver on the direction that elected members have set. But with that, we have a vision that we're focused about enabling what matters for Horowhenua. Council do have a set of values, which they, interesting actually, within the organisation, we set these values in terms of kind of to set the tone and culture of the organisation. Mahi tahi, aroha tumahi, manaakitanga, tiakitanga. And council we set those prior to the current term of council. But as the current term of council were inducted, they were keen to have a conversation about values and how it underpinned their governance table. And it was really cool actually to see a process where the governors adopted the organisation's values, but were able to put a lens across that work about what it meant for the elected member table. Underpinning those values are 5 key community outcomes, and so these community outcomes are consulted on and determined through a long-term plan process. A long-term plan process is one of those processes that I refer to as the most audited process within local government. But these 5 outcomes kind of underpin and become the framework for decision making for council. So when council are asking itself the hard questions about should we invest, should we make this decision, what about this trade-off, council have said what matters is partnership with tangata whenua, outstanding environment, fit for purpose infrastructure, a vibrant economy and strong communities. And you will read, when you take the time to read the pre-election report, the overlapping synergy between those 5 community outcomes. And while there isn't a hierarchy attached with those community outcomes, council were deliberate in identifying partnership with tangata whenua as the top outcome that when we visually showed those community outcomes. What we know about councils is that everyone wants council to do everything, but not really anyone likes to pay for it. And so part of the hard task of a council is setting priorities. And when you're an organisation that literally delivers services, and some of you have watched the video today where I talk about A to Z, animal control to Zumba and everything in between, like we're literally such a broad church of services. At the start of the council term, what you can expect as an elected member is to go through a process whereby you set a clear set of priorities for the organisation. And what that does is then informs the Chief Executive's clear KPIs and objectives, and ultimately from there, the organisation should just deliver and make it happen, assuming that council have resourced the organisation to deliver on it. So I just want to touch on what those current priorities are. Pursuing organisation excellence, so that's all about doing the basics well, making sure that we're doing our job in a way that is the most efficient and effective, but that the culture of the organisation is in good heart. Supporting Lake Punahou Horowhenua aspirations, and so this is about acknowledging the role that council plays in putting right our obligation around stormwater and the treatment of stormwater into Lake Horowhenua, but also the multiple projects that have synergy into the Lake Horowhenua project. Activating the Live-In Town Centre is a clear priority of the current council. Enhancing Māori relationships, with a particular focus on iwi hapu relationships. Ensuring financial discipline and management, and this is where we see a lot of the priorities around our risk and assurance role and our treasury role, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about debt management. Strategically positioning Horowhenua, and so that's about where we sit in the region, how we attract government funding, how we attract the attention of government to try new things. We have a priority around community preparedness, so this is all about responding and recovering from emergencies. We have a priority around community connections and better wellbeing, and this is everything from housing to social development to place-based relationships. We have a priority around enabling balanced growth with fit-for-purpose infrastructure. So this is about acknowledging how fast we're growing as a district, but making sure we've got the infrastructure in the right place at the right time, and that we are doing future planning to inform the capital investments required, not just in the hard infrastructure, but in the soft infrastructure as well. So thinking about our aquatics, our parks, our properties. Local water services done well has been a big priority of council, and you've seen that we've brought water services in-house, but we have also recently made a decision about the establishment of a water services organisation with neighbouring councils. Enriching our environment is a priority, and that's everything from climate action plans to the decisions around the closure of the Live-In landfill site and the restoration of the Live-In landfill, but also our continued focus around waste management and minimisation. And then finally, Otaki to North Live-In. So this is about advocating for the road and getting the road, but it's about championing long-term legacy outcomes and ensuring that the revocation strategy of the old road is in the best interest of our ratepayers. Now, within those 12 priorities is actually about 45 sub-priorities. And I say that with a smile on my face because in your heads you'll be thinking about, but what about this, and what about this, and what about this? And I think that is part of the complexity of council and local government, is there is so much to do and there is a big wish list. And so the role of an elected member in clarifying priorities and being clear about what really matters. Otherwise, we have organisations that spend a lot of time trying to do everything rather than doing the things that really matter really well. I wanted to touch on, like, you'll have your own views about what local government is. Some people hold the very traditional view that we're roads, we're rates, we're rubbish, we're a bit of red tape. And what we know in terms of our service offering is we're kind of everything in between. This is, responding the day after a big tornado that went through our town. There's broader biodiversity, placemaking initiatives, the role of community centres and libraries. What I would encourage you to be informed on is the current government's proposed changes around the Systems Improvement Bill, which is looking to change the purpose of local government. It is proposing to remove the well-beings out of local government. And I think what we can anticipate is the elected members of the 2025 to 2028 term will be the elected members that have to engage in a very bold conversation with their community about the future of local government and what services we do provide and what services we can't provide. You might hear that termed as getting back to basics or core services, and those are buzzwords that are often used when people are wanting to criticise local government, but there's not actually been a whole lot of work or conversation happen across communities about, well, what are core services? And we saw a little bit of that this time last year when we consulted with our community on the long-term plan. We proposed some changes around, dare I say it, burn mowing, but as well as a range of other services like reducing our library opening hours, reducing the opening of our youth space. All of that people had views on, and often those views are polarising. People either do want the service but don't want to pay for it, or they don't want the service. As you're reading the pre-election report and as you're, I suppose, doing your due diligence and accessing more information to kind of build your kitty of knowledge about local government, you'll naturally go to our long-term plan, our annual plans or our annual report. And what you'll see is that we report on information in categories. In local government, we call them activities. And often it's not always obvious to people what that service means or what that description means. But the reason we have to bundle services up is A, for audit purposes, but B, for rating purposes, because you could imagine like a rating bill that itemised, well, some people might like this idea actually, like itemised everything by every touch point, depending on how council approach its rating scheme, depends on how it wants to categorise services. And so this is currently how we categorise services. And some of them are obvious, right? I think we know what land transport is, we know what water supply is, we know what wastewater management is. You know, property is often a misunderstood category. Property is those assets that we own to help us deliver our services. So, for example, this building would be in the property category, so would the depot that we own, but it wouldn't be every property asset that we own. Versus community infrastructure, people are often kind of like, well, what's that? And that is parks and property, but it's also our libraries and our pools. And so, again, I'd encourage you to read the long-term plans and read the annual reports, because that's where you'll get that really rich information about, A, how much is that service costing us, but B, what does that service deliver? And in the pre-election report is a little bit of a description of them, but again, the long-term plan and annual report is where you're going to find additional information. I want to touch on the importance of our relationships with Māori. And under the Local Government Act, Council has an obligation to ensure it is creating opportunities for Māori to contribute to decision making. That is set out in a policy within Council's long-term plan. Council's current policy is one that we move beyond legal compliance, and that we are working on values-based partnerships that recognise and uplift the leadership of iwi hapu in our district. One of the really important pieces of work underway, which I'm hopeful will get adopted before the end of this term, is an iwi hapu engagement framework, and that engagement framework sets the scene for not just what iwi hapu can expect, but what our community can anticipate in terms of transparency and accountability around what that looks like, and how council's not just meeting its legal obligations, but when it's going further than its legal obligations, that community have visibility over that. Obviously, this year we also have a binding referendum around the Māori wards, and I know that some of you have heard me talk about this at another hui, but what I just want to emphasise is that the outcome of the Māori ward referendum does not come into fruition we'll have a 2-minute pause.
Monique will come back and finish that kōrero off, but what I will talk about is more the details in relation to standing and nominations. And so what...
Jeffrey, can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
My next idea is just there's two questions about representation on the national show and looking at the district.
Yep.
That was the first question I was in a sense. The second is when you've got Waikato Ward and the amount of people there, and you've got the Living Ward, and the Waikato Ward's only got 2 representatives, but the amount of people in there is more than the Living Ward. And how can it look like that? Why should the Living Ward have 5 and the Waikato Ward, which has more people, they have 2 representatives?
Yeah, so what you can see in the question that was asked for those who are looking online was why does in the pre-election report it show that the Waipehu ward has 2 seats and Livin have 5, and so what is shown is the percentage of community that one person is representing. And so in terms of when we go forward in the presentation, what you will see is that the Livin ward has 5 councillors. They have 11, as at the 31st of May, they have 11,309 electors, so people that can vote within that area, where Waipehu ward has 6,021. And so that's the different numbers as a whole. And so how it's worked out within the last representation review is there's quite a complex formula that maps it to plus or minus 10%, and that is how that calculation is worked out. So the numbers you see in your pre-election report is related to the number of people in which each of those representatives technically represent. So what you need to do as part of the rep review, the calculation that plus or minus 10%, it's to ensure that one elected member doesn't then have 10,000 people and another elected member has 2,000. So it's to share that representation out across those who are elected. So the numbers in the pre-election report are in relation to population per member who is elected, where a number I was going to give you coming up is around the number of current electors that are able to vote within that ward. So that's the difference. Yeah. Yeah, so that number is determined within the rep review, and so for this council we are required to undertake a rep review next year or leading up to our next election, and so that information, when we go through a rep review, we look at the new population stats across our district, we look at that down to ward, and then we look at whether or not those boundaries need to be shifted to ensure that representation is within the plus or minus 10%. So that was the boundary was last done in before our last election. So before our last election, the boundaries were redone, and that was looking at the introduction of the Horowhenua Māori ward. And so we did it off cycle, but we need to do it again prior to our next. Yes, and that's why the legislation says actually you need to do it within 6 years, which is within every 2 elections. And so that process is within legislation. We have to consult with the community. There is feedback given, and it is a decision of the next Tri-M Council that will make the decision around the representation. But there is some rules around legislation to ensure that plus or minus 10%, that one person isn't representing more than they should be. No worries.
My sincere apologies about that. Yeah. I'm not contagious, I promise. What I would add, and I didn't hear the kōrero, but what I would add is that on tomorrow's order paper is a notice of motion for council to consider potentially the introduction of a community poll alongside the binding referendum, which asks our community questions about representation. So, Charles, I'm sure you'll be at the meeting. But if that did go ahead, we'd obviously communicate to community as soon as possible. In the pre-election report, you'll find information about what we've achieved as an organisation over the last 3 years, what we're preparing for, some of the big projects ahead, and some of the big challenges that we need to overcome. Again, I would encourage you to take the time to read it. And if you're curious about more information, ask us questions, because we do want to help candidates be in a position where they're informed to debate the issues. I touched on earlier that the next 3 years will be potentially the most challenging for local government. If you've read the headlines in the last couple of days, we've got commentary from politicians around regional councils. I can feel my throat going again. But we also know with 3 Waters Reform, Resource Management Act reform, and the Systems Improvement Bill, the sustainability of local government, I think if you read the pre-election report from 3 years ago, I probably said the same thing, but I actually mean it now. Or something is going to have to give, because we're not in a position where we can continue under the current environment without either changes to our funding and financing rules or a change in expectation about what we deliver. In the long-term plan, which we're required to do a long-term plan every 3 years, we're then required to do an annual plan every year. If there's a big enough change in our annual plan, we've got to consult on it. When we developed our long-term plan, it was at the point in time when New Zealand was facing the highest costs, inflation pressures were real. And I'm not saying that that's not what it looks like today, but I'd encourage you to read the long-term plan in the context that it was developed a year ago. I might just get Ashley to touch on some of the legislative change that we're facing.
So what you will see on the screen here is that there is a heck of a lot of legislation change that is coming towards council that we need to respond to, ensure we're abreast of what the issues are, and be prepared to submit and keep informed with that. We've obviously got local waters done well, so within the last couple of council meetings a decision has been made in relation to that. We have the Local Government Act reforms, so that is looking at lots of changes within there. We have Resource Management Act changes, regional and city deals, and then we also have an electoral reform as well, looking at what that change might look like against that. There's also other legislations ahead that we're already currently looking at, which is the land transport management, the sale of alcohol, and looking at that around Easter Sunday and Monday. So there is a heck of a lot that is facing local government at the moment. We have officers that are constantly looking at the changes. We're responding to those. We're looking at how we can influence where we need to. And of course there is the Otaki to north of Levin, and so as a council we are strongly advocating for what we believe is right for the community. There's an announcement that has been made in the last week And so, yeah, there is a heck of a lot of central government direction and reforms coming our way. Within the pre-election report, there is a page on that. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see all of the other upcoming legislative changes that we keep abreast of and ensure that we are up to date and informed with that.
And you'll notice, so the pre-election report was written before the announcement last week, so it's already a little bit old, because in the pre-election report it talks about how we're fighting to make sure the government's going to deliver the road that we were promised. The government told us that they'd do that last week, so read the document in the context that things change every day. I think later on in Ash's presentation she talks about the 200 pieces of legislation that we're bound by. I actually think I've seen a number, it's like 340. We are a creature of statute, but we are also, at any point in time, the government can make a small legislative change here that has a trickle-down effect, and we like to call that a unfunded mandate. So that's when we get asked by the government to do stuff, but they don't fund us to do it. So we have to go to the ratepayers, and that's probably a broader conversation about the inequities around the funding and financing system between central and local government. In the pre-election report, we touch on some of the big projects and where we are investing our money over the next 20 years. Again, you'll find more information in the long-term plan. I was hoping my voice would allow it. Because I did want to spend a bit of time talking about the numbers, because we're conscious that, particularly those with business experience, they often can come into a council and they anticipate that our finances are constructed in a particular way, and then they soon realise that, A, because of legislation, but B, our auditing rules. Local government's finances they're constructed in a way that often can make it confusing for the reader to engage with. Some people are used to profit and loss statements, some people are used to cash flow statements, some people are used to funding impact statements. We have to produce information in funding impact statements. And you'll engage in the information, and you'll get from the pre-election report that we are on a journey of putting right some historical deficits around how we have funded services. For a range of reasons, councils in the past have made decisions to fund services by borrowing. And that's not just been to build things, but that's sometimes just been to deliver day-to-day services. And in the long-term plan amendment we did in 2023, we started a journey of putting that right. And that has largely been a big contribution towards the big rates increases that we've had over the last couple of years. Between interest rates, funding of depreciation, and clawing back the non-funding of operational services via debt, it means that our community will have really felt the hit. And I don't mean this in tongue-in-cheek, because I know that affordability is a massive challenge, but what had been happening is rates had been kept artificially low, services had remained high, and we had not balanced our budget for a number of years. We're on track to have our budget balanced by 2027, and even last week we heard from our credit agency. We got some really reassuring news about our financial trajectory in terms of the management of debt, the management of operational budgets, in order to get back to where we need to make sure that we've got the headroom, but that we've also got the intergenerational investment required in operational and capital services. I picked out some interesting numbers. People often like to focus on debt for a council, and debt can often be viewed by people as a bad thing. When you put our debt against our asset value, it kind of paints a different picture. So right now, our value of assets is $1.1 billion, and our gross borrowings is $240 million. Our net borrowings $179 million. 2/3 of that debt is Three Waters. So when we create the water organisation, the debt associated with our water assets will transfer, meaning that we will create quite significant headroom in our balance sheet, but it also means that that liability shifts to the water organisation. Council have been really focused around ensuring this organisation is operating in a constrained fiscal environment, and off the back of that we saw an 8% reduction in our workforce last year. We also saw Three Waters come in-house, which saw a $1.5 million operational savings. There has certainly been an expectation set in our financial strategy that we are to build headroom by selling non-core assets, and we are to manage our services by looking for efficiencies and effectiveness in everything we can do. Now, what we've had to balance that with is communities' expectations about services. And we saw that in the burn mowing conversation, but we see that every day where a community would like us to do this, this and this, but the challenges of how we fund it. 73% of our income is reliant on rates. Now, when you look at councils across New Zealand, not all are like that. A lot are. We are not one of those councils that own shares in a port or held on to shares in a lines company or have a big forestry investment that is producing yield back to the council to offset rates. We are very, very reliant on rates. And I'm sure that that is something that a new council beyond October will want to be thinking about as it approaches its next long-term plan. But what we know is that to make money, you've often got to spend money. And when you have a balance sheet that is so limited, because we literally have $10 million of headroom to hopefully help us in an event where we don't want an emergency, it really limits council about what levers they've been able to pull. And it is the levers, I talk about the spider web, and I'd encourage you as candidates, when you think about the issues that you're going to debate in the upcoming election, saying that you want to keep rates down or you want debt to be low, that's an important statement that you can make if that's what you believe in. But be very clear that everything has an impact the other way. So we keep rates down, we need to increase debt. We need to reduce levels of service. We need to manage our depreciation funding. We need to manage the way our assets are valued. Nothing in local government is ever black and white. It is a spider web, mostly because of how complex the revenue and financing policies and the treasury policies that underpin local government are. Again, read the pre-election report and the long-term plan and get engaged in the options and the material. And then just a breakdown as well about, like, if we looked at the average rating bill per month, where is that money going? And that will help you inform a view on, well, if you had a view that investment needed to increase or decrease, what the cumulative impact of that might mean in terms of services. Remembering that a candidate, while you could make as many promises as you want to the community, you require a majority around the table to change any policy. I'm going to hand over to Ash now, and she's going to take you through election timeframes and some of the roles, and then my voice will close us off at the end.
Okay, so I will get back to the slide and we will march forward into more of the candidate information. And so I spoke earlier around what my role is here at Council, but also my other role, which is our Deputy Electoral Officer. We also have Warwick Lamp. He is the Electoral Officer. And so throughout this process, you will, if you have any questions, it will likely come to one of the two of us. There are other members of staff who also have a good understanding in this space. We just want to clear up a couple of things. We often get questions around other organisations, and so often what role does the Electoral Commission play not really a heck of a lot in the local government elections. So yes, they help us with some material, so around enrolling. They also do the electoral roll. So the general roll is the roll that we utilise for the local elections. Other than that, they do not have jurisdiction or oversight to the local elections. We often have another question: does the Ombudsman have any say? No, they don't. The electoral officer and the Local Electoral Act are specifically exempt from the Ombudsman. Can the CE, Ombudsman, Mayor, Council tell the electoral officer or the deputy electoral officer what to do? No, they also can't. It is a district judge, court judge, that has the overall say in relation to this process. So what is being an elected member all about? It's a pretty big deal. Later on, we're going to talk about time commitment, and it's often something that people oversee and don't quite realise. But standing for council takes strong commitment. It is not a 5-minute job. There is a lot involved. It's not to be taken lightly. You represent and lead the district. You're the eyes. You are the ears. You advocate for them, and you are the governors of council. Within the handbook, page 8 to 10, provides some really useful information around skill set, kind of the what are those key skills in relation to that. Demands on elected members. You will need to balance a number of competing interests and wear a number of hats. As elected members, you're required to act as community leaders, representatives, board members at the same time. As an elected member, you navigate governing the council, but also the interest of the community as well. Core competencies. These are highlighted in the handbook, but it's really around having that genuine interest in the community, listening, speaking, reading agendas, understanding, asking questions. That are really some core competencies. The job description, so to speak, you only employ the CE, so that is your only employee as a council, and you represent, as I said, council and community. You formulate strategic direction, priorities, policy. You monitor performance. You develop and oversee council, and you ensure prudent use of council resources. Candidate safety. Being a candidate can be positive and rewarding, but it's not always a bed of roses. As you know, as the years go by, there are more forums, there are social media, there is more ability for you to be out in public eye. And so one of the things that we are working on around this election is to ensure that candidates are aware and can be sure to keep themselves safe going through this process. And so, there are some proactive steps that we will, if you do put your nomination in, that we will give you as part of it just to keep yourself safe. So using campaign-specific accounts, you might want to look at a different phone number. What we aren't doing now is we're not putting physical addresses online, which used to happen as part of the nomination form. Your physical address used to have to be on there and visible to the public. That has been removed to just ensure safety of those who are standing. So there has been some changes from the last election in that space. Oh, I've jumped ahead. So being an elected representative of your community, the piece I wanted to touch base in here is civic duties. So often we think about an elected member and it's coming into this room, sitting around on the table, making some really hard decisions, but often people don't understand the civic duty that holds as well. There are civic events, there are going out in the community, being seen, community ratepayer groups. There are lots of different aspects outside of just being in this room and receiving agendas. What can you expect if you are an elected member? Council business is held on a Wednesday. That includes council meetings, workshops, other committees. So if you are elected in, your Wednesdays will solely be council. It is generally a 11 a.m. start. At times we do need to bring that forward, and it can go up to 8 hours. Tomorrow is going to be quite a big agenda on the council meeting, and we will start at 11 and we go until it finishes generally. What we say is the mayor is a full-time job. A councillor is approximately 2 days a week. Could be more. That's to really get involved, invested, reading agendas, asking questions. A board member is about 1 day a fortnight. There's lots of research, reading, reports, agendas, civic duties. What we also say is it's flexible working hours. There are evenings, there are weekends, and there is also during the week. Remuneration. The remuneration is set by the Remuneration Authority. They issue a determination. These numbers, this determination was sent to us, I believe, either late last night or early this morning. And so these are the base numbers related to the determination, which will start 25-26. And so the mayor, you can see there, the councillor, that is a minimum base. And so what you'll see up here is the pool of 554,000. That pool needs to be fully distributed. And so depending on your role, so as a councillor, your absolute minimum that you can get is the 36,000. If you hold additional duties, higher duties, such as being the deputy mayor, you might be a chair of a couple of committees, that works out when we allocate the pool, that is worked out, and that comes through council. And then the board member chair and board members there. So you are paid fortnightly. An elected member is technically classed self-employed contractors. You pay your own tax and ACC levies. We also have allowance policies, and that is set through council. We currently have allowances for vehicle mileage and travel, childcare allowance. A device would be provided, but we do pay an allowance for internet and phone connection. So just a note that that is set by the Remuneration Authority. So just some additional details. So the electoral officer is solely responsible to conduct the election. The electoral officer is not subject to any directions from a local authority, elected members, or the CE. And the purpose of Warwick and myself is to provide an equal playing field for everyone who is standing. What we generally don't deal with is the complaints in relation to campaigning, especially those where it is signs. That is then passed in to our compliance team. But where there are alleged breaches, that's when we would step in. The timetable, that is, you can find that on our website. It is also in your pre-election report, so I'm not going to go into details on that. Key notes is nomination period opens on the 4th of July. From that date, you will be able to pick up nomination forms, download them online across our council facilities across the district. They close on the 1st of August noon, and noting that the 4th of July is next Friday. Nomination process. So nominations will be called for, Monique has already spoken about this, but it will be called for the mayor, the Horowhenua Māori Ward, which is 2 councillors, Kirikiri Ward 2, Live-In Ward 5, Miranui 1, Waipehu Ward 2, and then the Te Awaho Foxton Community Board, which is 5. The order in which our candidates will appear on the voting document is decided by council, and the decision was made to continue that by alphabetical. Nomination process. It's a 4-week period opens on the 4th of July, as I said. All nomination documents must be submitted together, so there is quite a bit of information that you need to get together. That all must be submitted at the same time, and you must show that the payment of the deposit has also been made. You must provide evidence that you are a New Zealand citizen. You have a profile statement. You can choose not to have a profile statement and leave it blank. You are able to do that. You must come into the office here. This is where we will be taking nomination forms, or you can scan those to us. Probably keep it there. Candidates must state, probably the other key point here is candidates must state if they reside within the area or not. So to be a candidate, you don't have to live within the Horowhenua District. You can live outside of the district. However, you must be nominated by 2 people that live or are enrolled in the ward in which you are standing for. So that is a very important part when you are putting your nomination in. This is the nomination form for the mayor, but this is what the nomination forms look like, and the title at the top would change depending on what you are standing for. That's just the bottom page. Candidate qualifications. So in terms of who can be a candidate, you must be a New Zealand citizen, you must be enrolled on the electoral roll, you must have a nominator and seconder in that area. You can stand